So let's start. How to index Storyblok content in Apache Solr and search it via Nuxt. Let's start with a quick overview. We have this website Nuxt, which we use to collect information around architecture and all the things we learn. This website is fed with content from Storyblok. We use Nuxt and Vue to render the application, the website. The website is hosted in Cloudflare on the edge. We use Wrangler to deploy the website to Cloudflare via GitLab. On that website, we integrated a search, which is powered by Apache Solr. It's then search to Solr and to render the results back on the websites. And during this talk, we like to dig into how to implement this in a project. So let's have a look on the big picture. We have GitLab, which deploys our website and our workers to the Cloudflare cloud. We have Storyblok, the CMS. We have a cloud for the Solr search engine. And we have other services like Microsoft for emailing or other web services. Besides Cloudflare, we also can deploy to Docker containers to host our next website. And on Docker, we also run our error tracking. In our case, this is Sentry. Now, during this talk, we will look into all the different topics in detail and see how they connect to build a website with a search unit. Let's start with Storyblok, which is our content management system. So Storyblok is a headless CMS. It allows us to model composable content. It delivers custom workflows and plugins to enhance the functionality. We have a visual editor, which is really nice for the editors to manage the content and have a live preview of the results. It comes with a digital asset manager for images, documents, and so on. It has custom roles and permissions on a higher level and up to the field level. Of course, it has localization. It has a headless architecture and API first integration. And we will look into this API and use it a lot during our talk and in our project. Although it comes with a robust front-end SDK implementation, and we use these SDK implementations in our project as well. We at DKD are Storyblok certified partners, and myself, I am a Storyblok ambassador. So let's look into Storyblok. If you log in the Storyblok content management system's backend, we at first have to model our data, which we like to use. On a website, this is obviously could be something like a page. And a page has different properties, like it has meta information, it has maybe a hero image, and of course something like a page title, and it can contain content. So first step, we model our different data models, content elements, and this is done in the block library. And if we have defined our data, we can create content. Here you can see our site structure, and we have pages like our home page or a folder with blog articles. And when we like to edit one of those so-called stories, you get this interface. On the right, you can see the fields to fill the content. And on the left, you can see the live preview of the page, which is very handy for the editors. At the top, you can have navigations where you can save your content or publish it. Also, you have functionality for workflow management, interact with other editors via comments, and have something like the rollback versions of your content. When you manage your content, you have the different properties of your page. In this case, here you can see the hero image on the right, which is an asset which we pulled from the asset management and placed it for this page. We have the page title, we have the meta information. And now you can see on the right that we have the body part, which contains all the content elements, like a text element, or we have a simple button, which is the call to action element, or on the bottom video integrations. And if you click on one of those, you can edit, for example, the text. If you then save and publish your content, Storyblok will give you a JSON output, which you then can consume, for example, in your website, in your apps, or use it to index the data, for example, for our search. But first, let's have a look how we can render this data from the content management system with our website. So for our website, we are using Nuxt and Vue. Nuxt is an open source framework which enhances Vue. We use the Vue single file components for the UI, and Nuxt brings us great performance and production grade full stack web apps with data fetching, routing, SEO and meta tag handling, state management, and also server-side rendering, middle API where we can define APIs on the server side to interact, for example, with the search. At the end, we have a Nuxt front end which renders our website. And if you look into the code for our website, we have something like a start point, which is our Nuxt configuration. Our Nuxt config contains things like all the environment variables which match for the Solr search. We have the information for the Storyblok API, like which version we use, like the draft or the publish version of the Storyblok API. We configure the access token, and all this done is via environment variables so that it's not hard-coded in the code, but set to the environment for safety reasons. In the Nuxt config, we also have the different modules which we use for our website project, like internet installation handling, image handling to render web images correctly, Tailwind CSS for styling, Nuxt security for content security policies, for example, and of course the Storyblok Nuxt module, which does the integration of Storyblok API and API fetching and rendering in Nuxt. For rendering the image, we configure although the base URL for Storyblok, though that's using the optimized images from the asset management in Storyblok. Regarding the content security police, we have to make sure that some domains are configured, that the live preview in Storyblok is working, and those configuration can be done in the next config as well. Then we have to render the different pages of our website. We do this via a dynamic component. So you can see the name of this page is with brackets and ... slug. So that's a dynamic one, which can handle all the slugs of the URLs from our Storyblok content. We use the async Storyblok composable to fetch the data based on the current opened URL route. And we also fetch some relation content. And in the template part, you can see there's a general Storyblok component which get the result as content, which then will be rendered in the Storyblok components. For example, here in the Storyblok folder, you can see all the blocks which we defined in Storyblok. For example, our page, a text element, video element, simple button. All those have representatives in the view file system. So we have a single file component for all those blocks. And here we have the component which is rendering a page. You can see this flag editable, which makes this component clickable and editable in the live preview in the Storyblok backend. We here render like the hero title and the hero subtitle or the hero image. And here you can see that we use not an image tag, but a Nuxt image tag, which renders a web optimized image with all the needed configurations. And we use a specific URL from the asset management and attach some image manipulation to get back an optimized hero image from the Storyblok asset API. Although above of the green box, you can see that we render the page title, and then we have again the Storyblok component, the generic one, which gets all the content of the page and iterates over it to render all the content components. And in the script part, we push our metadata, which then uses Nuxt functionality to render the meta tags in the header of the website page. Okay, this is some part of how we render the website, the blog components, and the page. Now let's look in the part of the hosting. We use Cloudflare for it. It runs JavaScript on the Edge network. The code will be deployed onto the entire Cloudflare network in about 30 seconds and then available in worldwide hundreds of locations. The code is run not on a Node.js server, but on a V8 platform, which is also the base for browsers like Chrome. And benefit is we write code and application which is very close to the users, where all over the world where the latency is around 50 milliseconds, which is very great for performant websites and web applications. And the cost for that is not too much, like for 1 million requests, you pay 50 cents. If you look into the backend, you can see all your Cloudflare workers. They have like an own name and their domains. You can see the environment variables which we defined and then use in our code, like here the Solr environment variables, which we saw first in the Nuxt config. And we use Wrangler to deploy our applications to Cloudflare via GitLab. So from Cloudflare, we have automatization deployments to Cloudflare, and we have a worker for our website stages there, and also for our Storyblok Solr indexer, which is a script which we'll look into in detail soon, which indexes the content from Storyblok and push it to the Solr index. So next part is Apache Solr. We also have it in the cloud. We use hostedsolr.com for it, which is a platform to host Solr. Apache Solr is an open source enterprise search platform. It's based on Apache Lucene. It's a great document storage where you define schemas and also have dynamic fields to extend the schemas. It has built-in language analytics. You can build facet searches, which we see in the example of our website search, which we can see there. You can have synonyms for searches, stop words, protected words. You can do boosting of search queries. You can have spelling suggestions. You can have more like this suggestions. And it also has a search and indexer API, which we use in our headless architecture to communicate with our Apache Solr service. So how does hosted Solr works? As a user, we have to register on hostedsolr.com. We can create a Solr core for Typo3, Drupal, or in our case, for Storyblok. This Solr core is hosted in the hosted Solr cloud, and we have an API to take the data and do the search requests and then show it on our website. Next, we want to look into how we get our data from Storyblok into our Solr search index. And for that, we use our indexer script. So let's look into how this works. We have Storyblok, and on Storyblok, we observe changes on our content stories, and for change occurs, a webhook is triggered, which sends the information of the changed stories to our Cloudflare Storyblok Solr indexer. The indexer gets the content of those stories from requests all the details of these stories from Storyblok, and then generates a document which we can index in Apache Solr. We send the document changes. This can be a creation of a new document which we like to index, update documents, or also, of course, deleting documents if content was deleted from the index. So we send this to Apache Solr, and then we have it in our search index. And let's have a look into this into detail. So Storyblok, our worker Storyblok Solr indexer, which runs in Cloudflare, and Solr and the Solr indexes on hosted Solr. Let's start with the webhook. We can configure the webhooks in Storyblok, and here I configured one which gets triggered when a story was published, unpublished, deleted, or moved. So whenever content changes, this webhook is triggered. We have defined an endpoint URL on Cloudflare, and also have a webhook secret, which is used to make sure that the only allowed scripts can interact with the webhook information. If we look into the payload of such a webhook event, this is, for example, sent when the action published happened with a text, the user Niels Dale published the story home and the URL to this story, API URL. And also we have the information in our JSON object, space ID, story ID, and the slug of the page which changes. Those informations are sent to the indexer script on Cloudflare. And when we look into the code, first we make sure that the information are secure, though we compare the webhook signature, the hash of the sended data, with the hash of the created body from the request response. So we check that the data is valid and the hash is the same. And if everything is secure, we have some Storyblok options defined, and we trigger the indexer script. So we create a new Storyblok Solr indexer where we send Storyblok options through. That's like the access token and some search options. We also have the Solr options, which are the parameters for the Solr core, and then the data which should be prepared for indexing. And if we look into the index itself, on the first line, you can see that we use the Storyblok client SDK, which I mentioned at the beginning when we talked about Storyblok. And in our Storyblok Solr indexer script, we first look how many pages of results we have for indexing. In the case we do full indexing, this can be like hundreds of pages. If it's just a content change, then we just need to request the changed page. And here we see the case that we like to do a full index of all data. So we first request how many pages of information we have, and then request all the information in a loop. And when we have all the content from Storyblok, which we like to index, we can prepare the Solr documents, which we like to index. We optimize the content part for it. So you can imagine if we have a website with multiple text blocks, you have to unify it that we have only the text and not all the structured information around it. So this is done in this line. And then we build document which we like to index in Solr. We have our unique ID. We define the type of the content based on the content component type from Storyblok. And this type information we later can use, for example, for a facet search. We define the URL of the page we index, title, and the optimized content. And then we push this to the Solr index. So the Solr API URL and that stuff was come with the Solr option, which we pass to the indexer script. And then we do a post request to Solr and send all the docs which we like to index. So now we have a website which has content from Storyblok. We have the content from Storyblok indexed in Apache Solr. So now we can build a search on our website which search through the content. So on the website, we have the search field where we can type a search word and get a list of results. And you also see that I filled it for the type and get facets. And now we have a search result page. So what's happening when we do the search in detail? So we're starting in the user interface, in the search view with the search mask. We send the search term to the front-end server side, which is a Nuxt server API, which we will look into in a moment. The API side will build a search query, which will then send to Apache Solr. Apache Solr responds with the search results. We prepare the response for the user interface and send the prepared search results back to the front-end view component, which then renders the search results. So now we will look into all these parts in detail. Let's begin with the search mask, which is a view component. We have a template with an input element for the search. where we bind the search word. And when we type search word into the field, in the script part, we have ref for the search word, and when the search on search function is executed by the click on the search button, we send an API request to the Nuxt server side, where we send the search word, the selected facets, and when we get the search response, we save it in the result and also transform the result facet information and save it in the facets variable. So let's have a look in the Nuxt server API side. We use this server side API to not have the Solr credentials and search API directly in the front end. Otherwise, the user and password and that stuff would be visible for every front end user. But you can see that it's in our project structure in the server API folder. So this is only run on the server side. All the runtime config comes from the Nuxt config, and all this data comes then from environment variables, which you saw also in the Cloudflare dashboard interface. So nothing is hard-coded here. We built the search query and the search facets based on the input from the search in line 10 and 11. And then we built the search URL in total in line 15 and do the request to the Solr search API. And then we can render the search results in our user interface. You can see the search list, and we have two facets. The facets are from the content type. So we have content type article, which is Blogbeiträge, and then we have normal content type page, which is Inhaltsseiten. And we can click on one of those facets to reduce the results. So if I go on blog entries, the result set is smaller, and we can then click on a search result. So now you saw the whole cycle from managing content in Storyblok and how we render our website hosted in Cloudflare, how the content is indexed by our script, which is triggered by webhooks from Storyblok, and then write the content in the Solr index, and how the website can use this API to display search results on our website. So thank you for listening to my talk. All the informations about me and the scripts and services I used you can find on this slide, so feel free to contact me if you have any questions.